I am coming from the school of thought that there is no reality, it's all perception. And I'm not being mystically Hindu in this, please don't mistake. I mean, how come you send 5 people to the same conference and they come back with 7 different opinions as to what happened in the conference? So there is no reality. So while I cannot disagree with Kiran on the fact that you should have more objective standards, I don't know how to define objectivity. And that is a thing I'm struggling with. So I don't agree with you, but I don't disagree with you, if you see what I mean. So I'm coming from a slightly different position, that if there is nothing called reality in this world, and I emphasize I'm not being mystical, I'm just being practical. I've even written a book on that subject. If there is nothing called reality in this world and the whole world is full of perceptions, then how do I view corporate governance? Because I have had the privilege of having participated in this journey for the last 25, since the Murthy Committee, 98 or whenever it was. I have seen many chairmen come and walk into SEBI and go away from SEBI, including our distinguished host today. By the way, for those of you who don't know Malayalam or Tamil, Male Vittil Damodaran means the Damodaran who's up there. So everybody be cautious. I felt that many Tamil challenged and Malayalam challenged people would not know the true meaning of M. Damodaran. No other SEBI chairman has had this appellage.
This title.
Of being called Male Vittil Damodaran. Now, so here is my opening statement, which is there is a connection between public governance, corporate governance, and the capability to regulate. Put this in the context of laws in general. We'll come to corporate governance in a minute, but public governance means how are PSUs and PSBs, for example, which are public institutions, governed. People take lessons from that. If you make LIC buy money, shell out some money to buy IDBI to save IDBI, people take lessons from that. You know, because you don't expect your public governance standards, you want it to be iconic for corporate governance. I'm shocked to learn that on the 1st of October 2017, this government passed a law which says that people who are taken to be cremated, you know, you go for cremation only once in your life, you have to produce your Aadhaar card. I don't know how many of you know this, but I was absolutely shocked. And then I was told that if you don't produce the Aadhaar card of the deceased, by the way, not of the person who's doing the job, then they will say, we will do with PAN card for 500 rupees. And if you can't produce a PAN card also, it costs a little more money. Everywhere in the world, you have a controlling shareholder. If you have more than 50%, you're a controlling shareholder. If you're less than 50%, you're a major shareholder. But it's not the word promoter that I have a problem with, but it's the connotation that promoter gives. Because then promoter comes with the attitude, not always, but sometimes, this is my company, I've let you in, you other people. Not all promoters do that, by the way. Very well responsible companies don't do that. But some of the fault lines that we are seeing in our governance structure come out of that sort of feeling. It's my company, I can do what I want. I can take money from the public, I can transfer it to my subsidiary, I can do that and let somebody catch me. Then you have the independent directors, whether they are watchdogs. According to me, independent directors are not, they are catalysts in the chemical process. They are not reactants. If the metaphor can be used of an automobile, the engine compartment where energy is generated, heat and confusion and chaos and entropy, that's management. The transmission system, the gearbox and so on, and reaching the power to the wheels is the board. And what the independent director is a sort of a steering wheel. Just make sure that the vehicle is not hurtling out of place. And then you have a regulator who's like the shock absorber, just making sure that the rides are smooth and the public doesn't suffer. So you have very different roles for them.
Gopal, if I may just interrupt, when I talk about over-regulation, I mean that whenever we are coming up with regulations in our country, irrespective of which department or which division comes up with regulations, we basically want to borrow the most extreme regulations as best practices from every part of the world and then put it all into one big regulation. That's the mistake we make.
I think I agree with you. That's your definition.
That is where I have a problem, that every regulator is trying to pick up a regulation from here, a regulation from there, and a regulation from somewhere else, and thinks that this is best practice. But that is not. Because you have to take each regulation in perspective and context of that country or that wherever you've adopted that regulation from. But if you try and pick and choose regulations from different ecosystems and put it into one, there's a problem. That itself creates a conflict. So that's where I think we need to be objective. When I say objective, that's what I'm talking about. Can't we first lay out the objectivity of these regulations? What are the guardrails do we want? After all, regulations are supposed to be guardrails and guidelines, right? So what are the must-have guardrails that we want? What are the kind of guidelines that we want people to follow? And then you formulate your regulations. That is the way I'm coming to it.
I think
what I'm saying is we tend to do this extreme regulation because we think, we've got the best of the world regulations. And that's wrong. That's flawed.
What you're saying is bring in regulations which are culturally compliant. Because what works in America may not work here.
Yeah.
The second thing you're saying is when there's an infraction of that regulation, resolve it. Don't let it be hanging around. Is that your definition?
Yeah, exactly.
And when you don't take care of these 2 points, then you're all over the place like a...
Exactly.
Well, I don't think anybody can dispute that. That exactly in line with what my own thinking is. That one of our serious disabilities in India is we have a legal system which cannot cope with the number of regulations that we make. So cases go on forever.
So like you said, let's look at that conflict of interest. I want to bring 2 examples here. One is that today we disallow ESOPs to be extended to board members, independent board members, right? Why? Because it's perceived as conflict of interest. And yet, in many parts of the world, this is an accepted norm, that you want the board to be engaged and invested in the company so that they drive shareholder value. So today, if I'm an unvested independent board member, who has no skin in the game, and if management comes to me with any proposal, I'm going to be not very bothered or objective about it, because if I really had a vested interest, I'd really want to know much more about what the management is bringing to the table, saying I'll ask much more intriguing questions because I know that shareholder value is at stake. Now, the role of a board in general is to drive shareholder value, right? But if there's no skin in the game, why would I drive shareholder value? I'd rather, be very conservative. I'd rather just protect shareholder value, because that's what we are made to believe today in every board, saying, don't take risk, don't expose this company to anything beyond a certain risk. This is not a good way of running a company, I personally believe. I think the board has to be engaged in understanding the risk and in basically managing that risk. And if you're all the time going to be about not taking too much risk, I think that's going to be also very dangerous. So I just feel that's where the conflict of interest is. And I think for a long time, we used to allow ESOPs to be extended to board members. I think it stopped in 2006 or something like that.
10 years.
Something like that. Today in the US, I'll be very honest, every board member expects ESOP because they want to be thing. And I agree with it that it's a double-edged sword, because on one hand you don't want the board to take, big, get involved in taking big risks, but at the same time, you go after those companies who are misusing that privilege. That's all I'm saying. And in any case, when you give ESOPs to such boards, you can almost give it at the end of their terms. It's like a vesting. You don't have to give it up front. So there are various ways of dealing with that. But today I find it's very difficult when you don't extend that ESOP to board members. I somehow feel that you are not getting them aligned with the interests of the company. You're constantly focusing on the conflict of interest. You're not focusing on alignment of interest. To me, that's a big flaw in our corporate governance.
But if there's a natural tension between independent directors and management, is it good to align them? Because I have served on at least 30 boards without any ESOPs, by the way.
That's okay.
And I don't think...
That's okay, but that's your personal thing, Gopal. Don't make it a general statement.
No. I'm merely making a statement that I have served in 30 boards.
I agree.
And what I'm asking myself, the question that's raised in my mind is, for an independent director to play his or her role in the board, without ESOPs, will that person be maimed? I don't think so. That's the point I'm making.
No, I'm just saying that you actually drive that person more into aligning their interests with the company's interests.
But the job of creating...
But you don't... But see, what I'm trying to say is, the perspective you need to have is that, why are you making this person a watchdog rather than someone who is actually aligned with the interests of the company? That's the difference.
But that's a very fundamental point.
Yeah. So you're saying that the independent director has to be a watchdog. I don't agree with that perspective.
What should he be?
I think the independent director has to play a very independent role in driving shareholder value. I think the independent director has to be also making sure that they're aligned with the interests of the company, and knowing, because what are the kind of independent directors you're calling? You're calling independent directors who give you a different perspective. They're supposed to ask you important questions. No independent director will allow you to take a decision that puts the company at risk, by the way.
Indians are no worse or no better than people anywhere in terms of being crooks and so on. You'll always find a few crooks in every society. We have our share. Point number 2, we have always been an apparently over-regulated government system, but with no adequate means to implement that. And so we end up with cockeyed outcomes, some of which we have mentioned. Indians have been so long, for 70 years, a whole generation of people have been subjected to impractical laws and over-regulation, that we find jugaad ways to get around it. This has reached the point of diminishing returns. And the only way now is to find other methods to restore trust in a society. And we will keep it to the corporate world because that's our subject. Then we are saying there are 2 ways that at least has come out in this discussion. One is technology, and that requires application of mind in the way you described the Jack Ma formula. And the second way is to say behavioral corporate governance does make some sense.